My name is Colleen, and at 52 years old, I thought I understood what family meant. After my divorce 5 years ago, my ex-husband Thomas married Amanda, 15 years his junior. I've tried to keep the peace to still be a mother to my 3 children. But today, at my son's Mother's Day gathering, my daughter Jessica looked me in the eye and asked me to step out of our family photo so her stepmom could take my place. The knife twisted when she called Amanda her real mother. If you're watching this and have ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a heart in the comments and subscribe to join me for what happened next. I met Thomas in college. He was studying business and I was working toward my teaching degree. We fell in love quickly, married at 23, and within 2 years welcomed our first child, Michael. Ryan followed 2 years later, and finally our daughter Jessica arrived when I was 28. For 27 years, I thought we had a good marriage. Not perfect, no marriage is, but solid. Thomas built his financial planning firm while I taught elementary school and raised our children. We had a comfortable home in a nice suburb of Boston, took family vacations to Cape Cod every summer, and seemed to be living the American dream. The children grew, and as they did, I noticed Jessica became increasingly attached to her father. While Michael and Ryan and I shared a love of books and quiet activities, Jessica and Thomas bonded over sports and outdoor adventures. She was undeniably Daddy's girl from the moment she could walk. I never minded. I thought it was beautiful to see their relationship blossom. I had special bonds with each of my children in different ways. With Jessica, we shared shopping trips and baking sessions. She'd sit on the kitchen counter as a little girl, her legs swinging as we made chocolate chip cookies together. Everything changed when Thomas turned 50. Looking back, I should have seen the signs of his midlife crisis. The new sports car, the sudden interest in fitness, the late nights at the office. But I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I after nearly 3 decades together? The day he told me he wanted a divorce remains vivid in my memory. It was a Tuesday evening in April. The kids were grown and out of the house. Michael was already married with his first child on the way. Ryan was finishing graduate school and Jessica was in her sophomore year of college. "I've fallen in love with someone else," Thomas said. His voice steady, unapologetic. "Amanda. She works in my office." Amanda, his administrative assistant. 15 years younger than me with perfect hair and a body untouched by carrying and nursing 3 children. I later learned their affair had been going on for nearly a year. The divorce was quick and on paper fair. Thomas had always been generous with money, and that didn't change. I kept our family home, received substantial alimony, and we split our savings. But there's no equitable way to divide a family, to pass out holidays and birthdays, to allocate love and loyalty. Michael and Ryan were supportive from the beginning. At 25 and 23, they were mature enough to understand that marriages can fail without either party being entirely at fault. They maintained close relationships with both Thomas and me, calling regularly, visiting often. Jessica's reaction was different. At 19, she was still forming her adult identity, still vulnerable to having her world shaken. She took her father's side immediately and completely. In her eyes, I must have done something to drive him away. I must have failed as a wife, as a woman. When Thomas introduced Amanda to our children, just 2 months after our separation, Jessica latched onto her immediately. Amanda, with no children of her own, lavished attention on my daughter. Shopping sprees for designer clothes. Thomas and I had always considered unnecessarily extravagant. Concert tickets in VIP sections, weekend trips to New York City. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself Amanda was just trying to connect with her new stepchild. But as months passed, I couldn't ignore the calculated nature of her generosity. She wasn't building a relationship with all of Thomas's children, just Jessica. the only one who seemed swayable, impressionable. My attempts to maintain my relationship with Jessica were met with increasing resistance. She'd cancel our lunch dates at the last minute. My calls went to voicemail. My texts received one-word responses, if any. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd say, "I'm just busy, Mum," with an emphasis on mum that somehow made it sound like an insult rather than a term of endearment. Through it all, I tried to remain civil. When Thomas and Amanda married a year after our divorce was finalized, I sent a card congratulating them. At family gatherings, for the children's achievements, Ryan's graduate school graduation, Michael's daughter's christening, I was polite and kept my distance. Mother's Day had always been special in our family. Even after the kids grew up, we maintained the tradition of gathering at my house for brunch. Thomas would come over with the children bringing flowers and a gift they'd all contributed to. After the divorce, Michael and Ryan continued the tradition, though Thomas no longer attended. Jessica came the first year after the divorce, bringing a small plant and leaving early. The second year, she sent a text message. The third, nothing at all. So when Michael called suggesting we hold Mother's Day at his house this year, something felt different. When he mentioned casually that Thomas and Amanda would be there for the kids, I felt a prickle of apprehension. My grandchildren, Michael's two little ones, loved me and called me Grandma Colleen. But I wasn't naive enough to think their presence was the only reason my ex-husband and his new wife were being included. Still, I agreed. Michael's invitation was well-intentioned, and I didn't want to create friction. "Of course," I said. "That sounds lovely." But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that this Mother's Day would be different from any that had come before. The invitation sent a flutter of anxiety through my stomach, but I was determined to approach the day with grace. After all, this was Mother's Day, and I was still a mother. That hadn't changed with the divorce papers. I marked the date on my calendar and began planning what I would bring. My strawberry cheesecake had always been a family favorite. Jessica had especially loved it growing up, often requesting it for her birthday instead of traditional cake, making it felt like extending an olive branch, a reminder of sweeter times. As the day approached, I found myself dwelling on Mother's Days past. When Jessica was 6, she'd made me breakfast in bed. Cold cereal swimming in too much milk and orange juice with pulp, because she knew I preferred it that way. The card she'd crafted had stick figures of our family with me drawn larger than everyone else. "Because mums are the biggest deal," she'd explained. When she was 12, she'd saved her allowance for weeks to buy me a silver bracelet with a heart charm. I still wore it occasionally, though I'd stopped wearing it to events where Jessica might be present. Her cold stares at the sight of it had become too painful. Despite the strain of recent years, I couldn't help hoping this gathering might offer a chance to reconnect. Perhaps in Michael's home on neutral ground, with the distraction of children and other family members, Jessica might let her guard down, just enough for me to glimpse my daughter again beneath the wall she'd built. The week before Mother's Day, I went shopping for gifts. For Laura, Michael's wife and mother of my grandchildren, I found a beautiful cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of blue. For Stephanie, Ryan's girlfriend of 2 years, I selected a cookbook from a chef she admired. For Emma and Jacob, my grandchildren, I purchased books and small toys. I hesitated over what to get Jessica. In recent years, my gifts to her had been returned unopened or acknowledged with the briefest of thank yous. Still, I wanted to try. After much deliberation, I found a delicate silver photo frame and placed inside it a picture of Jessica at her college graduation. She looked so proud, so beautiful, standing between Thomas and me. It was one of the last photos taken before our family fractured, one of the last times Jessica had looked at me with genuine warmth. I spent more time than I should have selecting my outfit for the day. Nothing too flashy. I didn't want to seem like I was competing with Amanda. But nothing too dowdy either. I finally settled on a cornflower blue dress that brought out my eyes and complemented my silver-streaked blonde hair. I'd stopped colouring it after the divorce, embracing the natural aging process instead of fighting it. The night before, I called my sister Nancy. She'd been my rock throughout the divorce, and its aftermath always available with a listening ear and straight talk when needed. "I'm nervous about tomorrow," I admitted after filling her in on the situation. "Of course you are," Nancy said. "It's an awkward setup. But remember who you are, Colleen. You're those kids' mother. Nothing and no one can change that." "Jessica seems determined to try." I said the words painful to voice. Nancy's sigh carried through the phone. "That girl is confused and hurting. Thomas did a number on her, making her choose sides. And this Amanda woman sounds like a piece of work." "I just want my daughter back," I whispered. "I know, honey. Just go tomorrow with your head high. Be yourself. Don't let them see you sweat. And if it gets too uncomfortable, you call me and I'll fake an emergency to get you out of there." I laughed, grateful for her support. "I'll be fine. It's just one day." After we hung up, I sat at my vanity looking at my reflection. The last 5 years had changed me. There were more lines around my eyes, yes. But there was also a strength there that hadn't existed before. The divorce had forced me to rediscover myself outside of being Thomas's wife. I'd started painting again, something I'd loved in college, but abandoned as family life took over. I'd made new friends through a book club and a hiking group. I'd even gone on a few dates, though none had developed into anything serious. The morning of Mother's Day dawned bright and clear. I wrapped my gifts, carefully packed up my cheesecake, and gave myself a final look in the mirror. "You are enough." I told my reflection a mantra I'd adopted during the darkest days after Thomas left. "You are loved. You matter." With that, I picked up my purse and headed out the door, unaware of how fundamentally this day would change everything. Michael lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in a suburb north of Boston. When I arrived just before noon, the spring air was fragrant with lilacs and freshly cut grass. I'd come early as Michael suggested to help with last-minute preparations before the others arrived. "Mom." Michael greeted me with a warm hug as he opened the door. At 30, my eldest son had grown into a man who resembled his father in build, but had my gentler features and empathetic nature. "Come in. The kids have been asking when Grandma Colleen would get here." Inside the house was immaculate. Clearly Laura had been busy preparing for the gathering. The dining room table was set with her best china and vases of fresh flowers decorated every surface. Grandma Emma, my 5-year-old granddaughter, came racing down the hallway, her dark curls bouncing. I knelt to catch her in a hug, breathing in her scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "There's my girl," I said, holding her tight. Jacob, not quite 3, toddled behind his sister, thumb in mouth, a stuffed dinosaur clutched in his free hand. Laura emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was a petite woman with a warm smile that had instantly won me over when Michael first brought her home. "Colleen, so good to see you," she said, embracing me. "Thanks for coming early. I could use the help with the appetizers." Working alongside Laura in the kitchen provided a welcome distraction from my nerves. We arranged cheese platters, filled pastry shells with savory fillings, and checked on the ham baking in the oven. Through the kitchen window, I could see Michael in the backyard, setting up lawn games for the children. Ryan arrived next, bringing his girlfriend, Stephanie. At 28, my middle child had always been the peacekeeper in the family. He had a quiet strength about him, a steady presence that had become more valuable than ever in our fractured family dynamics. "Happy Mother's Day, Mum," he said, hugging me tightly and presenting me with a gift bag. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fountain pen. "For all those stories you're always saying you want to write," he explained. We were all chatting comfortably in the living room when the doorbell rang again. Michael went to answer it, and I felt my shoulders tense. I knew who it would be. Thomas entered first, still handsome at 55, though his dark hair was now heavily salted with grey. He nodded at me cordially. "Colleen, you look well." Before I could respond, Amanda swept in behind him. At 37, she was undeniably beautiful, with glossy dark hair, a slim figure, and careful makeup that enhanced her features without appearing obvious. She wore an expensive-looking cream-coloured dress and heels that put her at eye level with Thomas. And then came Jessica. My heart lurched at the sight of my daughter. At 24, she had blossomed into a stunning young woman with her father's dark hair and my blue eyes. She wore a designer outfit I couldn't have afforded to give her, and her expression was guarded as she surveyed the room. Her eyes passed over me as if I were a stranger, landing instead on Laura, whom she greeted warmly. When she finally acknowledged me, it was with a stiff, "Hi, Mum," before quickly moving to coo over her niece and nephew. I observed with an aching heart how Jessica embraced Amanda, the two of them sharing a private smile before Amanda said, "I brought those macarons you love from that French bakery." "You're the best," Jessica replied, emphasizing the words in a way that felt pointed, as if to highlight my own deficiencies in comparison. Throughout lunch, I maintained a pleasant demeanor, engaging primarily with Michael Ryan and the grandchildren who provided safe conversational territory. Thomas kept his distance, making polite small talk when our paths crossed. Amanda was perfectly composed, the ideal guest, complimenting Laura on the food and the home decor, asking interested questions about the children's activities. Jessica, seated between her father and Amanda, spoke animatedly to everyone but me. When I tried to engage her asking about her job at a marketing firm in the city, she gave brief, non-committal answers before turning back to Amanda. After the main course, I helped Laura bring out dessert, my strawberry cheesecake, alongside a store-bought chocolate cake Amanda had brought. I noticed Jessica take a slice of the chocolate cake without even glancing at my contribution. It was while everyone was enjoying dessert that I overheard Jessica call Amanda Mom for the first time. They were looking at something on Jessica's phone, heads bent together when Jessica said, "Don't you think so?" "Mom," so naturally, so easily, that it was clear this wasn't the first time she'd used the term. I felt the colour drain from my face and quickly took a sip of water to compose myself. Across the table, I caught Ryan watching me, concern in his eyes. Michael, too, seemed to have noticed his forehead creasing slightly. After dessert, we moved to the gift exchange portion of the afternoon. I watched as Jessica presented Amanda with an elegantly wrapped box. Inside was an expensive-looking bracelet with a pendant that read, "Bonus Mom." Amanda made a show of tearing up before embracing Jessica. "I love it, sweetie. And I love you." When Jessica opened my gift, she barely glanced at the photo in the silver frame. "Thanks," she said flatly, setting it aside without another look. The final blow came when Michael suggested we move outside for family photos. The weather was perfect, sunny, but not too bright, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the oak trees in the backyard. Laura had set up a tripod with her camera, and we arranged ourselves in various groupings. First, the entire family together, then grandparents with grandchildren. Michael suggested a photo of just the moms with their kids, meaning Laura with Emma and Jacob and me with my 3 adult children. We were rearranging ourselves when Jessica spoke the words that would change everything. "Can you step aside, Mum?" she said, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time that day. "I want my real mother in this picture." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Amanda, to her credit, looked uncomfortable, but she didn't decline the position Jessica was offering her. Thomas stared at the ground, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Michael started to protest. Jess, that's not. But Jessica had already moved to stand beside Amanda, taking her arm and smiling for the camera as if I didn't exist. As if I hadn't carried her for 9 months, laboured for 17 hours to bring her into this world, nursed her through fevers and heartbreaks, celebrated her triumphs and soothed her disappointments. Everyone was watching me, waiting for the breakdown, the scene, the drama. I could feel their eyes, their collective held breath. Instead, I reached up and smoothed my hair, adjusting a strand that had come loose in the breeze. I smiled. Not an angry smile, not a bitter one, but a genuine smile, tinged with sadness. Funny, I said, my voice steady. Even ghosts know when to leave the frame. I turned and walked a few steps away, giving them the space to take their photo. But inside, something had shifted. A lifetime of accommodating others, of keeping the peace at my own expense, of smiling through pain. Something had finally broken free. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I moved away from the photo session, maintaining my dignity, as I crossed the lawn to a small bench beneath an apple tree at the edge of Michael's property. I needed a moment alone to process what had just happened, to gather my thoughts, before deciding how to respond. The words kept echoing in my mind. I want my real mother in this picture. After everything, the sleepless nights, rocking Jessica as a colicky baby, the school projects I'd helped with, the teenage heartbreaks I'd soothed, how could I not be her real mother? I heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see Ryan walking toward me. My middle child had always been the most emotionally intuitive of my children, sensing undercurrents that others missed. "Mom," he said, simply sitting beside me. "That was horrible. I'm sorry." I shook my head. "It's not your fault. You didn't say it." Ryan was quiet for a moment, plucking a blade of grass and twirling it between his fingers. "Jessica is confused," he finally said. "She's been struggling ever since the divorce. I think in her mind taking sides makes it simpler, and Amanda has been working hard to position herself as the better option." "Working hard how?" I asked, realizing I'd never really discussed Amanda's behavior with any of my children, not wanting to seem like the bitter ex-wife. Ryan sighed. "She tells Jessica things. About you and Dad. About why the marriage ended. According to Amanda, you were cold, uninterested in Dad's work, unwilling to support his ambitions." He looked at me directly. "We know that's not true. Michael and I remember how it really was. You attending every office party, entertaining his clients in our home, supporting him while raising us and working yourself. But Jessica was away at college during those last few years. She doesn't remember the same way we do." I felt a surge of anger. Amanda has no right to rewrite our history. "No, she doesn't," Ryan agreed. "And Dad should have corrected her, but he likes the narrative too. It absolves him." He placed his hand over mine. "Mom, Michael and I have talked about this. We think you need to stop being so accommodating. You're letting them paint you as the villain, or worse, as someone who doesn't matter." His words struck home. Since the divorce, I'd been so focused on being the bigger person, on not creating waves that might push Jessica further away, that I'd allowed myself to be diminished, erased. "What would you suggest I do? Create a scene at a family gathering that's not who I am?" Ryan squeezed my hand. "No, but speaking your truth calmly and firmly is who you are. The mum who taught us to stand up for ourselves and others. The teacher who didn't tolerate bullies in her classroom." He smiled slightly. "The woman who once told off a store manager for mistreating a young cashier. Remember that Jessica does. She told me years later it was one of her proudest memories of you." The memory brought a smile to my face. Jessica had been about 13, watching wide-eyed, as I'd calmly but firmly confronted a manager who'd been berating a teenage employee in public. "I've been trying so hard not to rock the boat," I admitted. "And what has that gotten you?" Ryan asked gently. "Jessica is slipping further away, and Amanda is getting bolder. That real mother comment wasn't spontaneous, Mom. It was calculated to hurt you." I nodded slowly, realizing he was right. My silence had been interpreted as weakness, perhaps even as admission of the false narrative Amanda had been spinning. "I don't want to lose her completely," I whispered. "You're already losing her by doing nothing," Ryan said bluntly but kindly. "At least if you stand up for yourself, you'll be doing it with integrity." As we sat there, Laura appeared, hesitantly approaching. "Is this a private conversation, or can I join?" she asked. Ryan patted the bench beside him. "Join us. We're staging an intervention for Mum." Laura sat down, smoothing her sundress. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. It was completely inappropriate, and Michael and I are both shocked." "Thank you," I said sincerely. Laura glanced back toward the house, then lowered her voice. "I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've noticed some things. Amanda, she's not as perfect as she appears." "What do you mean?" I asked. Laura looked uncomfortable but continued. "When you're not around, she makes these little comments. About your parenting, about your home, even about your appearance. Nothing direct enough that anyone could call her on it, but enough to plant seeds. And Jessica soaks it all up." I felt my spine stiffen. "She talks about me to my grandchildren." "No," Laura assured me quickly. "Never in front of the kids. She's careful. But she's been working on Jessica for years, from what Michael tells me." She placed a hand on my arm. "Colleen, you're a wonderful mother and grandmother. Anyone with eyes can see that. But this situation isn't going to improve if you keep turning the other cheek." As we talked, I found myself remembering something my own mother had told me years ago. "Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to stand firm in your truth." I realized I'd been misinterpreting what it meant to be the bigger person. It didn't mean accepting mistreatment or allowing false narratives to go unchallenged. It meant addressing problems with dignity and honesty, rather than descending to pettiness or revenge. I watched Emma and Jacob playing tag on the lawn, their innocent laughter carrying on the breeze. What example did I want to set for them? That their grandmother was someone who could be disrespected and erased from family photos, or that she was someone who stood up for herself with grace and courage? The decision crystallized in my mind. I would not create a scene. I would not lash out in hurt or anger. But neither would I continue to smile and accept being pushed aside, having my role as mother questioned or diminished. As I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years, Emma came running over, slightly out of breath from playing. "Grandma Colleen," she said, her small hand slipping into mine. "Will you help me make a daisy chain Mummy showed me once, but I forgot how?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, allowing her to lead me to a patch of daisies growing at the edge of the yard. As I sat in the grass with my granddaughter, showing her how to carefully split the stems to link the flowers together, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. This moment, teaching, nurturing, loving, this was motherhood. No one could take that from me. Not Thomas, not Amanda, not even Jessica in her confused pain. When Emma placed the completed daisy chain on my head, like a crown declaring me Queen Grandma, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I would reclaim my place in this family not through anger or confrontation, but through truth. We returned to the house as the afternoon was waning. The uncomfortable moment of the photo session had created a strained atmosphere, with people speaking in overly bright tones to compensate for the underlying tension. Thomas and Amanda were sitting in the living room with Jessica, the three of them examining the photos Laura had taken on a digital camera. Michael was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher with an intensity that suggested he was working out some frustration. "It's about time for gifts," Laura announced clearly, trying to steer the gathering back to safer territory. We gathered in the living room, forming a loose circle. Laura had organized a small table with the various packages people had brought, each labeled with the recipient's name. As the designated host, she began distributing them. I watched as Jessica opened gifts from her brothers, from Laura, from Thomas. Each received a warm thank you and genuine smile. When it came time for her to open Amanda's gift, I observed how the woman made a performance of it, leaning forward eagerly. "I hope you like it," Amanda said. "I put a lot of thought into it." Jessica unwrapped the box to reveal a pair of expensive wireless earbuds she had apparently been wanting. "Oh my God, these are perfect," she exclaimed, hugging Amanda tightly. "Thank you so much, Mum." There it was again. Mum. The word that had once been mine alone where Jessica was concerned, now given to another woman who had known her for just 5 years, who had never packed a school lunch or stayed up all night with a sick child. When Jessica opened my gift again, the silver frame with her graduation photo, her response was even more dismissive than before. She barely glanced at it before setting it aside with a cursory, "Thanks." Amanda, sitting beside Jessica, picked up the frame. "Oh, this is from graduation, isn't it? You know, I always wished I could have been there, but of course it wasn't appropriate yet." She smiled at me with false sweetness. "It's nice that you were there for those early milestones, Colleen. That's what being a mother is really about, isn't it? Being there for the formative years, laying the groundwork for the amazing woman Jessica has become." Her words were carefully constructed to sound complimentary, while actually being deeply condescending, implying my role as a mother was past tense, relegated to history, while she enjoyed the present relationship. Something inside me snapped. Not in an angry, emotional way, but in the way that truth sometimes breaks through barriers we've constructed to avoid pain. "Jessica," I said calmly, "would you mind if we spoke privately for a few minutes?" My daughter looked startled, then wary. "Why?" "Anything you have to say, you can say here." "I could," I agreed, "but I think we deserve a conversation that's just between us, mother and daughter." I saw Thomas shift uncomfortably in his seat. Amanda's smile tightened slightly. "Fine," Jessica said after a long moment. "We can use Dad's office." She stood and led the way without looking back to see if I followed. Michael's home office was a small room off the main hallway, furnished with a desk, 2 chairs, and bookshelves. Jessica closed the door behind us and immediately crossed her arms defensively. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone suggesting she was doing me a favor by even having this conversation. I took a seat in one of the chairs, gesturing for her to take the other. "It's about what happened today and what's been happening for the past 5 years. If this is about the photo, I'm not apologizing," Jessica said immediately. "Amanda is more of a mother to me now than you are." The words were meant to hurt, and they did, but I didn't let the pain show. "How do you figure that Jessica—" She seemed taken aback by my calm question. "She's there for me. She listens. She doesn't judge me for staying close to Dad after the divorce." "When have I ever judged you for that?" I asked. "I've always supported your relationship with your father. I've never spoken ill of him to you or your brothers, even after what happened." "You didn't have to say anything. I could see how you looked at him, at us, like we'd betrayed you somehow." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. 5 years ago, your father chose to end our marriage because he fell in love with someone else. That was painful for me, yes, but I never, not once, expected you or your brothers to choose sides. All I wanted was to maintain my relationship with my children. Then why did you make it so difficult? She countered, always with the sad eyes, the wounded looks. I was sad, I acknowledged. My family as I knew it was breaking apart, but I've tried repeatedly to connect with you. Calls that go unanswered, invitations declined, birthday gifts returned. I looked at her directly. Can you tell me honestly that I haven't tried? Jessica shifted in her seat, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before the defensiveness returned. You've never made an effort to get to know Amanda to accept her. I sent a card when they got married. I've been polite at every family gathering. What more would you have had me do? Celebrate the woman who had an affair with my husband while we were still married? Jessica's eyes widened. That's not what happened. Dad said the marriage was already over when he met Amanda. He said you two had grown apart, that you were cold and uninterested in his life. Now we were getting to it. Is that what he told you? What Amanda reinforced? It's the truth, Jessica insisted, but I could hear a note of doubt creeping into her voice. It's his version of the truth, I said gently. Your brothers remember differently. They were living at home during those last years while you were away at college. So you're saying Dad lied? Her voice rose slightly. I'm saying people tell themselves the stories they need to hear to justify their choices. Your father needed to believe I was cold and uninterested to justify leaving. Amanda needed to believe our marriage was already over to justify pursuing a married man. I leaned forward. But Jessica, you don't need to accept their version uncritically. You're an adult now. You can look at the evidence and draw your own conclusions. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Thomas opened it without waiting for an answer. Everything okay in here? He asked, his eyes moving between Jessica and me. We're having a private conversation, I said firmly. As I requested. Thomas frowned. Jessica looks upset. Dad, it's fine, Jessica said, though she did sound shaken. What's going on? Amanda appeared in the doorway behind Thomas. Her perfect composure slightly cracked with concern, or perhaps fear that her carefully constructed narrative was being challenged. I'm speaking with my daughter, I said, standing up. And I'd appreciate the courtesy of being allowed to do so without interruption. If you're upsetting her, Thomas began. The truth can be upsetting, I cut in, especially when it contradicts the convenient story you've been telling. What is she saying to you? Amanda asked Jessica, directly ignoring me. I'd had enough. 5 years of silently accepting disrespect, of watching another woman insert herself into my role, of having my history rewritten. Amanda, I said, my voice level but firm, this conversation is between Jessica and me. You are not her mother, regardless of what title you've encouraged her to use. Amanda's face flushed. I've never forced Jessica to call me anything. That was her choice. A choice influenced by years of subtle and not so subtle manipulation, I replied. Comments about my parenting, my appearance, my role in the divorce. Laura has heard them. Ryan has heard them. Did you think they wouldn't tell me? Thomas stepped fully into the room. Colleen, this is inappropriate. You're creating drama at a family gathering. No, Thomas. I'm finally addressing the elephant in the room that everyone's been tiptoeing around for 5 years. I turned back to Jessica. Sweetheart, I love you. I have always loved you and I always will. Nothing will change that. Not divorce, not distance, not even you pushing me away. But I won't be erased from my role in your life. I won't pretend it's acceptable to be asked to step aside from a family photo so your stepmother can take my place. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You're hurt and confused. The divorce shook your world, and you needed someone to blame. I was the safer target because you knew I would love you anyway. Amanda offered you a shiny, perfect alternative. Someone who would never disappoint you because she doesn't have the 24 years of complex history with you that I do. By now, the commotion had drawn Michael and Ryan to the doorway as well. The small office was becoming crowded, but I stood my ground. You have no right, Amanda began. I have every right, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm her mother. I carried her for 9 months. I nursed her through chickenpox and broken hearts. I cheered at every soccer game and dance recital. I helped her apply to colleges and cried when she moved into her dorm. I looked directly at Amanda. You've been in her life for 5 years. I'm glad you care for her. But you do not get to replace me or rewrite our family history to make yourself the hero and me the villain. The room fell silent. Jessica was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face. Thomas looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Amanda's perfect mask had slipped completely, revealing anger and something else. Fear, perhaps, that her carefully constructed position was being threatened. Michael stepped forward. Mum's right, he said quietly. This has gone too far. Jessica, what happened today with the photo? That was cruel. Mum didn't deserve that. I never said she did, Jessica protested weakly. Ryan joined in. You've been pulling away from Mum for years, Jess. We've all seen it. And Dad and Amanda have encouraged it, whether they admit it or not. Thomas's face reddened. That's not fair. I've never told Jessica not to have a relationship with her mother. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Ryan countered. You let Amanda make those little digs. You rewrote the narrative of your marriage. You created an environment where Jessica felt she had to choose sides, and you made sure your side looked more appealing. I hadn't expected my sons to speak up this way, to articulate what I'd felt, but never said. Their support brought tears to my eyes. I don't want to be in the middle, Jessica said, her voice small. I just want everyone to get along. Getting along doesn't mean allowing disrespect, I said gently. It doesn't mean pretending it's okay to be called less than a real mother after 24 years of mothering. I moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in mine. Jessica, I'm not asking you to stop loving your father or even Amanda. I'm asking you to make room in your heart for me too, for the mother who has loved you from the moment I knew you existed. Jessica looked at me. Really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry about the photo, she whispered. I wasn't thinking about how it would feel for you. It was a small admission, but it felt like the first crack in a very thick wall. I squeezed her hands. Thank you for saying that. Thomas cleared his throat. Colleen, I may have given Jessica an incomplete picture of why our marriage ended. You think, Ryan muttered, earning a sharp look from his father. Thomas continued, it was easier than admitting I'd strayed, than admitting I broke our vows. So you made Mum the villain? Michael said flatly. Nice dad. Amanda stepped forward. Her composure regained, though her eyes were hard. I never meant to come between Jessica and her mother. I was just trying to build a relationship with my stepdaughter. By positioning yourself as the better alternative, Laura asked from the doorway. By making subtle digs about Colleen when you thought no one who would tell her was listening. Amanda had the grace to look embarrassed. I may have overstepped at times. You think... This time it was Michael echoing his brother's sarcasm. I stood up feeling oddly peaceful despite the confrontation. I didn't come here today looking for this conversation. but I'm glad we're having it. For 5 years, I've tried to be understanding, to be the bigger person. But being understanding doesn't mean accepting disrespect or allowing myself to be erased from my children's lives. Thomas looked at me with something like respect in his eyes. You're right. I'm sorry, Colleen, for a lot of things. It wasn't a comprehensive apology, but it was something. A start. Jessica stood up, wiping her eyes. I need some air, she said, moving toward the door. Jessica, I called after her. She paused, looking back at me. I love you, I said simply. Always have. Always will. She nodded once before slipping past everyone and down the hallway. I heard the front door open and close. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a strange, awkward energy. Thomas and Amanda soon made their excuses and left. The rest of us moved back to the living room, a peculiar mix of exhaustion and relief in the air. As Michael and Laura cleared the last of the gift wrappings, Ryan sat beside me on the sofa. You okay? He asked quietly. I considered the question. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. For the first time in a long time, I think I really am. The remainder of that Mother's Day was subdued but not unpleasant. Jessica didn't return to Michael's house, sending a text to her brother that she needed time to think and had gone back to her apartment in the city. Thomas and Amanda had already left the atmosphere too uncomfortable for them to remain. Michael, Laura, Ryan, and Stephanie made efforts to salvage the day, focusing on positive conversation and the children's antics. Emma presented me with the daisy chain crown again, insisting I wear it for the rest of the afternoon. Jacob climbed into my lap with a picture book, asking me to read to him. These simple moments of grandmother love felt like balm on the raw wound of the day's events. As I read about hungry caterpillars and wild things, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was my place in the family, not pushed aside or replaced, but central and essential in my own way. When it was time for me to leave, both Michael and Ryan walked me to my car. I'm proud of you, Mum, Michael said, embracing me tightly. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted, but it was necessary. Ryan hugged me next. Do you think it will make a difference with Jessica? I sighed. I don't know. I hope so. But even if it doesn't change things immediately, I needed to speak my truth, for myself as much as for her. You did the right thing, Ryan assured me. Even Dad knew it. Did you see his face when you called him out? I smiled slightly. I wasn't focused on his reaction. I was focused on finally saying what needed to be said. As I drove home, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. For 5 years, I'd carried the weight of silence, of accommodation, of putting everyone else's feelings above my own. Speaking up had been frightening, but also liberating. The following week passed without word from Jessica. I told myself not to expect immediate results, that healing would take time if it happened at all. I returned to my routine, teaching part-time at a community college, attending my book club, working on a watercolor painting I'd started. On Thursday afternoon, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Jessica. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow, just the two of us? My heart raced as I typed back, of course, just name the time and place. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our home's neutral territory, where we could talk without the pressure of family surroundings. When I arrived the next day, Jessica was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She'd remembered how I took mine, a small detail that gave me hope. Hi, Mum, she said as I sat down. Her voice was tentative, her expression guarded but not hostile. Thank you for suggesting this, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Jessica stared into her coffee for a long moment before speaking. I've been thinking about what happened on Sunday, about what you said. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry for the photo thing. It was cruel and you didn't deserve it. Thank you, I said, simply giving her space to continue. I think you were right about some things. She looked up at me, her blue eyes, so like my own, clouded with confusion. After the divorce, I was so angry and hurt. It was easier to blame you than to face the fact that Dad had an affair, that he broke up our family. It's natural to want to protect the image you have of your father, I said gently. Amanda made it easy, Jessica continued. She was always there with a sympathetic ear, always ready to subtly reinforce the idea that you were somehow to blame. She twisted a napkin in her hands. I think I wanted to believe her because it gave me permission to pull away, to protect myself from feeling abandoned by you too. I never abandoned you, Jessica, I said, my voice catching. I've been right here all along waiting for you to let me back in. I know that now. A tear slipped down her cheek. Ryan and Michael have been talking to me all week. They told me what it was really like at the end between you and Dad, how hard you tried to save the marriage, how blindsided you were by the affair. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. And Laura told me about the things Amanda has said about you when you weren't around. Jessica wiped at her eyes. I feel so stupid for not seeing it. You're not stupid, I assured her. You were hurt and vulnerable, and they took advantage of that. I've been so awful to you, she whispered. Returning gifts, ignoring calls, and then Sunday with the real mother comment. She shook her head. I don't know if you can forgive me. I reached across the table to take her hand. Jessica, listen to me. You are my child. There is nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you or close the door to reconciliation. Nothing. She squeezed my hand, more tears falling. I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving, I said. It's about love. And I have loved you from the moment I knew you existed. We talked for hours that day, really talked for the first time in years. Jessica shared how isolated she'd felt at college. When the divorce happened, how Amanda had swooped in with shopping trips and spa days, while I was still reeling from the end of my marriage. How Thomas had subtly encouraged her to see me as the reason for the divorce, rather than his own choices. I don't think I can call her Mom anymore, Jessica said, toward the end of our conversation. It feels wrong now that I understand what was happening. You don't have to make any dramatic declarations, I advised. This isn't about choosing between us. It's about finding a way forward that honors all of our relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries. She nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to try family therapy, she suggested. The three of us, you, me, and Dad, to work through some of this with a professional. I think that's a wonderful idea, I agreed. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Jessica hesitated, then moved to embrace me. It was the first real hug she'd given me in years, not the stiff, obligatory contact of recent times, but a genuine connection. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the weight of her head on my shoulder, as I had when she was a little girl. I love you, Mum, she whispered. The real one. In the months that followed, we began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. There were setbacks. Jessica didn't immediately cut ties with Amanda, which sometimes created tension. Thomas was initially resistant to family therapy, but eventually agreed under pressure from all three of his children. Those therapy sessions were often difficult, bringing to light years of miscommunication, manipulation, and hurt. But they were also healing, creating space for honesty and accountability. Amanda, feeling her position threatened, initially doubled down on her efforts to maintain her hold on Jessica. But without the foundation of lies, and Jessica's emotional vulnerability to build on her influence began to wane. By Thanksgiving, 6 months after the Mother's Day incident, the family dynamics had shifted significantly. We gathered at Michael's house again, but this time, Jessica sat beside me at dinner, engaging me in genuine conversation. When Thomas suggested a family photo, Jessica positioned herself between her brothers, with me standing proudly with them. Amanda and Thomas stood to the side, present, but no longer central to Jessica's identity. The photograph from that day sits on my mantel. Now my 3 children and me smiling, not with the forced brightness of people avoiding discomfort, but with the authentic warmth of a family finding its way back to solid ground. The following Mother's Day, 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, Jessica hosted a brunch at her apartment, just for me. She presented me with a gift, a bracelet, to replace the one she'd given me at 12, the one I'd stopped wearing to avoid her cold stares. "I noticed you don't wear the old one anymore," she said. "I thought maybe it was time for a new start, a new tradition." The bracelet was silver like the original, but instead of a simple heart charm, it held 3 birthstones, one for each of my children. "Turn it over," she instructed. Engraved on the back were the words, "For my real mother, always and forever." If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that motherhood isn't just about the happy moments, the milestones, the photographs on the wall. It's about weathering storms, standing firm in your truth, even when it's difficult, and keeping your heart open, even when it's been broken. To all of you watching who might be going through something similar, whether you're the parent being pushed aside or the child caught in the middle of adult conflicts, I want you to know that healing is possible. It takes courage to speak your truth. It takes strength to maintain boundaries. And it takes tremendous love to keep the door open for reconciliation. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? How did you handle it? Please, like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of family healing, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Remember, even in our most invisible moments, we matter. Our love matters. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to refuse to be erased. Thank you for listening, and until next time, hold your head high and your heart open.